you're trying to help someone else overcome their problems. And as Miller would say, you're trying to help them find their way home.
This podcast is brought to you by Blackaby Ministries International. To find out more, visit blackaby.org.
Well, welcome to the Richard Blackaby Leadership Podcast. My name is Sam, and I'm your host. I'm joined by the ever-voracious reader, Richard Blackaby.
Good to be with you again, Sam.
Always a pleasure, Richard. And there's never a shortage of books on your desk stacked up, ready to be read or partially read or having just been read.
I keep trying to whittle that pile away, and then I suddenly find myself buying more books.
I know. But I've got to have this book, too. Yeah. And one of those books that you picked up recently and have read is a book by Donald Miller, and it's called Building a Story Brand. And this is a book I'm sure you're going to tell us all about, Richard.
Yeah.
And I have a suspicion I perhaps know. We actually, I ordered some of these for our staff, and we're going to read these as well as a group, and I'm excited to dive into my copy. Haven't yet, so I'm getting a sneak peek.
I'm expecting, and I don't know if there must be an audio version, Sam. That's what you normally
I like
process, but
that's usually I prefer to read just a book in my hand, but oftentimes I'm several books deep, and but I can listen because I do a lot of driving.
This is one, and what happened? I was doing speaking at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and he was a plenary speaker, and so I heard him present really the material on this particular book, and I was really engaged with it, really intrigued by it, and I felt it was he had a lot of really great things to say. So I'm sure a lot of our listeners have read some of his books before. He's I think one of his first books he wrote that was became very popular was Blue Like Jazz. He's known for, and then he's written a number of other books. I think most of the books, everything he writes becomes a bestseller. But so I really enjoyed hearing him, and then the next morning I was up right before him. And we got to meet, and so I sometimes if someone just presents something that I really am intrigued by, I just go back to my hotel room and order it right away, and so this book kind of got bumped up in line, kind of cut in line in front of a bunch of other books that have been sitting there waiting patiently for their turn. It's not a real long book; it's like just over 200 pages, but. It came out in 2017, so it's been out now 7 or so years. But I liked the approach, and so like we've done before, I'm not going to sit here and just read you the whole book or just give you all the details. I really encourage you to go out and buy the book and read it. But our ministry, I think, a bunch of the leaders are going to all. Just read through it and then just talk about how we can apply some of its truths to how we do things. And so I just kind of full disclosure on that. It's not just a book I read kind of casually, but I'm going to have our staff just chew on it a bit and see what we can apply to our own ministry. But so between what I heard him present, he basically presented this book, and I enjoyed that, and he's a great presenter. And then I followed up and kind of read what he had said in large part, but just read it in book form. And I wish we had a recording. I tried to see if there was a recording of that presentation. I was going to just have all of our staff watch it, but they didn't do that because they want you to, you need to buy the book. So, or hire his service. He has people that will present this material and be a consultant for your organization. So with all that said, let me just kind of share a few things that he talks about. One is he just says there's power in words. He has an interesting statement. He says, the fact is, pretty websites don't sell things. Words sell things. And I think a lot of times when we're putting a website together, we really want to put really captivating pictures and so on. And he wouldn't necessarily say pictures are bad, but he would say, for instance, a lot of times if maybe it's a school or it's an institution, you go to the website and on the front page is a picture of their headquarters, their building. And he would say, well, that's fine if people are wanting to buy headquarters buildings, but that's not why they went to your website to see your building. They have a need, and they are going to see if you can meet that need. And so he would say, yeah, maybe more, have a picture of a very satisfied, relieved customer that represents what they want to be. They want to be a relieved, satisfied customer. So put a picture up that is going to identify with them. And so he says, use your words well. And the other thing that, of course, he's going to say, and there's something very, very powerful about stories. And Sam, I love stories. I think innately I've kind of felt like stories have a way of just capturing truth and ingraining it into people's minds in very powerful ways. And so he's very much, that's partly why he drew me in, because when he started talking about the power of story for business and for organizations, even churches, I just thought, well, yeah, I'm curious about that. And so he has spent a lot of time studying stories and what makes a good story, what makes a compelling story. And so he has some interesting things to say. I might just kind of highlight a couple of things in particular that I felt like were real takeaways for me, at least. There's a lot in the book, but he talks at one point about our brain. He says the human brain basically has two functions. And one function, he says, is to be constantly on the lookout for what will help the person survive. And then if you're surviving, to help you to thrive. And so that's what the brain's primary task is. It's to keep us safe. It's to keep us alert to dangers. It's to help us know how to get our next meal, how to be safe at night from bad guys, how to not be taken advantage of, harmed in some way, and how to just thrive, how to be successful. And so our brain it spends a lot of time. It's constantly thinking about that. Everywhere you go, it's thinking, would that be good for me? Would that dessert at the dessert table, should I eat that? Was that going to add another pound? Or should I, they've got 6 books there in the book table. Is there any of those books that actually would help my business? Or if I spend my money, is it just going to sit on a shelf and never be read? Your brain's constantly trying to think about that. And so, and if you're talking with a friend and the friend starts to give you this really long description of what they did on their vacation, you're thinking, okay, is there anything that I'm hearing right now that actually is going to be, that I could do myself? Maybe they went to a great resort area on a vacation, and that's something that I would really thrive if I were to do that. And it sounds like they've found a way to get a good deal and save me a lot of money. So you're leaning in and you're thinking, yeah, this will be helpful to me. This would really help my marriage, my family. But someone else is just droning on and on about themselves and their vacation, and your brain figures out pretty quickly, yeah, there's nothing here for me. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to get the same discount they got. There's nothing of value here. Then he says that somewhere at least 30% of the average person's time is spent daydreaming. I had no idea that, boy, we got a bunch of BMI staff daydreaming 30% of their time.
Oh, boy.
What are we paying these people?
Well, that's 30% not on the clock.
Yeah, he says, and basically what he's saying is that's your brain's way of, well, I mean, the second thing he would say the brain does is it's constantly trying to save calories. And in his presentation, he mentioned that a brain will burn around 800 calories a day, which seems like a lot. He said it burns more calories than any other organ you have, because it's always functioning. Even if it's just sort of in your subconscious, it's still working and it's burning calories. And so what he would say is it's trying to preserve calories. So if maybe you're telling me a very detailed, fact-filled, kind of boring, hard to follow story, and I'm having to really concentrate even just to follow what you're trying to tell me, and it doesn't really make much sense. And and it's not that I can use it myself, but you're telling me this very detailed, complex story with way too much information. My brain very quickly says, okay, if I keep following this story, I'm going to burn a lot of calories, and at the end of the day, it will not have benefited me in the slightest. And so what you do is you learn how to nod your head and say, but you're daydreaming about something else entirely in your brain. And it's just the brain's way of conserving calories. When you're daydreaming, it's not a lot of work. You're just kind of drifting. And then if along the way, all of a sudden, your friend says, hey, well, by the way, did you see that Amazon's got a 50% off sale for today on such and such? All of a sudden, you're zoned back in again, because that might help you to thrive or survive in some way. And so he says that whenever you're presenting something, everybody's brain is hearing what you're saying. When a speaker gets up, a pastor gets up and begins their presentation, their sermon, whatever it is, everybody in the room is trying to figure out as quickly as possible, does this apply to me? Is this going to be helpful? Is this practical at all? If it's just sort of a rambling discourse that doesn't really, there's no application for my life, then you're going to be sitting there in the pew daydreaming. And so he says, you've got really a limited amount of time, which every good speaker understands this intuitively, but you only have so much time to convince them that what you're saying actually is of value. And so you want to get to that as quickly as possible so that they buy in. And he says that of all the different things that people can do, what captures and holds people's attention more than anything else is telling a story. You can watch a movie, you can watch a story unfold in a movie for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and be engaged the whole time. But someone tries to tell you about what they, when they had a hard time getting a parking place, when they had to go downtown to the dentist yesterday, and you're checking out pretty quickly. Just you get a bunch of pie charts, various graphs, and before long, it's just hard to follow. But your brain has a way of just staying engaged, not clicking out with an engaging story. And so a lot of this book, what Miller does is he just says, he kind of unpacks what every good story, there are certain components, he would say. And I won't unpack all those. He would say there's 7 basic parts to a good story. And he would say most stories are going to have these components to them. But just want to share just 1 or 2 that I think in particular, I'll just touch on it because I want to really whet your appetite to just go ahead and buy the book and dig into it. But he would say, there are 1 or 2 things I think just to particularly highlight. And one is that he would say, of course, every story has a hero, has a main character. And that character always has a problem. If there was no problem, there'd be no story. There'd be no interest. If they were just having a happy day, sitting on a park bench, look in the sun, nobody would watch that for an hour and a half in a movie. But there has to be a conflict. There has to be a need, something that's preventing this hero, this character, from becoming or doing all that they need to or want to. And so, something that he would say is there's always a problem. And it's the problem that really makes the story. And so what he would say, and something that I think that, you and I have talked about with our ministry is if you're selling something or if you're ministering and you're offering a ministry, you need to identify what the problem is that your nonprofit, your church, your business is trying to address. And a lot of times it's amazing how you don't think about that. And he would say you need to be able to state that in a sentence. Hey, here, this is your problem, and here's how we can address that problem. We can solve that problem for you, or we can guide you to a solution for that problem. And so you want to kind of lead with that problem. And I've thought about even as I present talks or preach sermons, I think maybe early on you need to identify at the beginning of a sermon, here's a problem that most people, or maybe all people, have. I want to get that in front of you, and you may immediately identify and say, yeah, I have a problem with that. Our church is all going through experiencing God right now. And I'm thinking, a lot of people would admit that they don't know. They've heard about God. They believe in God. They don't know that they've ever experienced him, or that they've ever heard God speak to them, or that God's ever expressed himself as a real person in their life. And they long for that. They would love for that. But no one's ever helped them to know how to experience God. And so that's a big part of what our ministry does, Blackview Ministries. We solve that. We help people solve that problem.
Yeah.
We help people do more than just know about God, but we help people experience God in their own personal life, in their families, in their churches, in their businesses. And so he would say, whatever organization you're a part of, identify what is the problem. We must exist to address a problem. What's the problem we're addressing? Let's get that front and center. And then the other kind of interesting thing he says is that he says in most stories, like a Star Wars story, the main character you could identify as a Luke Skywalker. He's kind of the hero of the story, but then Miller would say that most stories will also have what he calls a guide, and there's different. It could be a sage. There are different words for it. He uses the word guide, but
Yeah.
And that would be like a Yoda figure, an Obi-Wan Kenobi figure, and these guides are. They're wise. They've had success in this same area themselves, but it's not about them solving the problem. Yoda's not going to defeat the dark side. He's going to help Luke Skywalker take on Darth Vader and the Emperor and so on. But Luke Skywalker needs help. He feels inadequate. He doesn't know what to do. He's failed when he's tried, and he just can't figure it out. And then enters the guide. Now, and Miller in his presentation says, Mary Poppins is a guide. There's all kinds of guides in Hunger Games, in a lot of the different movies. There'll be someone that comes along, and they might kind of seem strange even, but they're the person that brings the information that the hero needs.
Gandalf.
A Gandalf, yeah, although Dumbledore or whatever those guys are, all you can name a lot of them if you stop and think about it. And so I think one of Miller's really helpful contributions is he says the problem with a lot of organizations, especially when it comes to their website, their marketing, is he would say that we present ourselves as the hero. And so if you go to a lot of websites, it's as if it's all about that brand or that company, that church. Here's what we do. Here's our building. Here's our history. We've been around for 200 years, and here's all the founder and all the previous CEOs and so on. And here's all the awards we've won. And it's all about it's all about us. And he would say, if you confuse someone, your customer, your client is the hero. You need to position yourself as the guide. You're trying to help someone else overcome their problems, and as Miller would say, you're trying to help them find their way home. They're trying to get somewhere. They're trying to become something, and they need your help to do it. And he says the problem oftentimes in communicating is the way we present things on our website, the way we present stuff in our brochures, our advertising, is we kind of come in as the hero that's going to solve the day. And he says that's confusing because our customer kind of feels like they're the hero. They just want help. They don't really need a second hero. They just need to know how to become the hero that they need to be for their own organization. And so he would say, position yourself as a guide. And he quotes someone as well that in this area who says that when you're a speaker as well, sometimes as a speaker, it's a Nancy Duarte, that if you get on the stage, if you get behind the microphone, it could be tempting for you to be the center of attention, the hero. Okay, I'm here with all the answers, the funny stories. the wisdom, and it's sort of all about me. And you know this a lot of times because speakers will start talking about all their victories and their story. And here's how I became successful, and here's how I overcame my problems. But the reason you're really listening to that person is because you've got your own problems, and you hope that there's something they will say that will help you solve your problems. You're not there just to celebrate someone else having victory. You want victory yourself. And so she says, when giving a speech, position yourself as Yoda and your audience as Luke Skywalker. And I thought that was helpful for me too. I've spoken quite a bit. And it doesn't mean that you don't ever share from your own experience. You know, you have to share from your own vantage point. But you want to be sharing kind of like a Yoda, trying to help others rise up and find victory in their life and to overcome their problems. And so, just that simple shift in perspective, I think, can be very powerful. And so he would say, and as he in his book he unpacks the 7 different aspects of a good story, and he would say basically when you look at your website, pretty well every word on your website ought to identify with one of those 7 parts of a story. It's either identifying the problem, it's providing a solution, and so on, and then ultimately you're encouraging them to take action. At some point, there has to be some kind of appeal to sign the dotted line, step out, and get going. And then he would say, ultimately, you also in the story you need to describe either what will happen if they don't achieve their goal, if they don't overcome if you can't defeat Darth Vader, what's going to happen to you and to the rest of the known world. But if you do defeat him and you do rise to the occasion, then what's going to happen? What will the world look like then? And so he would kind of spell out these 7 different aspects and say, somewhere in your website it ought to address all 7 of those. And if you present yourself in terms of a story, that's far more interesting than just an information dump. And I'm afraid that a lot of websites, that's kind of what it is. It's just how much information can we dump onto our page, and so that made me think a lot, Sam, which it could involve some work on your behalf at some point.
I'm afraid it will.
But I think you're sensitive to a lot of this to begin with, and we've done some. I think some of this. I think what I like about what he does is a lot of it is kind of innate. I think we sort of know that if you just bury people with information that they can't process it, it's too daunting. And there's a lot of information that we put up there that maybe is interesting to us, but that's not why they didn't go to our website to find out who led the organization 25 years ago. They want to know how we can solve their problem, and you want to make it as easy and as accessible as possible. And so I was challenged by a lot there. I think it will affect the way that I speak. I think I'm going to probably try to present the issue, the problem, more up front. Kind of say that this is why you need to listen to me for the next 35 minutes, because this is the problem that we're going to address. We all have this problem. Here is some wisdom that can help you overcome the problem. And then make it about them. It's about, okay, the key is when this presentation is done, when you finish reading the website, it's about what you do. It's about your success. That's why we exist, is to help you be successful and to overcome your problems. And when you do, then we're successful. And so another thing Miller says is just the more you talk about your client, your customer's problems, the more interesting that you become to them. I mean, if you talk about your successes, that people start daydreaming. But you start leaning into other people's problems, and they're very interested in that. They've got a lot of skin in that game, and they want to hear about solutions. And so whether you're preaching, whether you're making a marketing pitch, a sales pitch, or you're designing a website, think in terms of what is the problem we're trying to solve. Why does our organization, why does our church exist? What are the problems we're trying to solve? And then how can we come alongside people and help them overcome it? So lots of interesting things. But again, just, we keep coming across this in various books and with various leadership thinkers, is just the power of story. Just put your whole business in terms of a story, your whole ministry in terms of a story. And of course, you're probably going to have some anecdotal stories that pretty well present the whole reason why you exist. You can always tell stories about people that were really struggling, and they came to your church or they came to your business and they got a solution, and their life's never been the same again. And their story sort of is a model of why you exist, and you want to tell those stories over and over again. And last thing, he just talks about one-liners. He says you ought to be able in one sentence, one line, be able to summarize what your purpose is, why you exist. By the time that elevator ride goes to the next floor, you can state why you exist. And I've had people ask me that about why Blackaby Ministries International exists. What do you guys do? That's a legitimate question. And a lot of times, I know that there's been people, when you ask, well, what does your church do? What does your company do? Why does your company exist? Sometimes we want to say, well, do you have a half an hour? Do you have an hour for me to explain all that we do? Well, sometimes you don't. You have a minute. And so in a minute, can you, in one sentence, summarize your purpose? And he would say, that's a great exercise for everybody in the organization. You should be able to go around the board table and say, why do we exist? And everybody should be able to answer that in a very succinct, concise way. And so I'm looking forward just to kind of thinking that through with our own ministry. I think a lot of those things I think we've kind of addressed, we've tackled in various ways, but I think, again, sometimes organizations just tend to get so bogged down in the day-to-day, effort and work that they do that sometimes you need to back up and just say, let's just remember why we do this. What problems are we addressing, and how can we make our customers, the people we minister to, succeed in what God is calling them to do as well. And if they succeed, then we succeed as well. So encourage people to read this book. I've got a book review that'll be coming out on it as well on my blog site. We can leave a link to the show notes. But lots of great books out there. This is another one I'd encourage you to read and just become familiar with Miller. He's written a number of books. He's a good writer, practical, and I think you'll pull some great nuggets out of there that you can use as well.
Well, I look forward to reading my copy as soon as I get my hands on it. And until next time.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If this is something you enjoyed, it really makes a difference if you leave a review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Don't forget to subscribe and share with your friends. We always love hearing from our listeners, so email us at podcast@blackaby.org.